With the Valar came other spirits, whose being also began before the world, of the same order as the Valar, but of a less degree. These are the Maiar, the people of the Valar, and their servants and helpers. Their number is not known to the elves, and few have names in any of the tongues of the children of Ilúvatar. For though it is otherwise in Aman, in Middle-earth the Maiar have seldom appeared in form visible to elves and men. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will be discussing the Maiar of Middle-earth, who they are and the general aspects of what we know of their history. I'll link some articles in the description that helped in the creation of today's video, as well as some other related videos there and in the cards above. My friends, I hope you, your kin, and loved ones are all staying well, and thank you all for joining me today. Let us begin our tale. Maiar, meaning the beautiful in Quenya, were the lesser beings among the race of the Ainur. These were the beings created by the thought of Eru Ilúvatar, before the Ainulindale, the music of the Ainur. The mightiest among the Ainur was Melkor, later known as Morgoth by the elves, and he would have powers akin to what we may call a god, but not of the god, which is Eru Ilúvatar. Others lesser in power than Melkor, but still mightier than others of the Ainur, would go to Middle-earth after the music, and they would become the Valar, or the powers of Arda. Some of these were Manwë, Ulmo, Aule, Varda, Yavanna, Tulkas, and others, and their story is told in a different video of mine. Today, however, we are concerned with the folk of the Valar, the lesser Ainur who chose to go to Middle-earth. And just as the mighty were known as the Valar, the less powerful would be called the Maiar. Many, but seemingly not all of the Ainur came into Arda, and they would be split among the Valar and the Maiar. Of those who came to the world, they became bound to it and in it, unless they were cast beyond the walls of night like Melkor was. Thus, it seems as with any immortal being in Arda, the Maiar who went there were bound to that world until its end, and as Gandalf showed, Maiar may be reincarnated. Now they could also change form and appearance, or choose to have no physical form, or fana, as it is known in Quenya, at all. Now the powers, or Valar, took on certain elements of the world. Manwë the Elder King, for instance, was the Lord of the Winds, Airs, and Birds, just as Varda, his wife, was the Lady of the Stars, for she created them. Similar elemental motifs are connected to each of the Valar, especially the chiefs among them. And to a lesser extent, the Maiar have similar connections, as the Maiar served the Valar. In other versions of Tolkien's works, as found in places such as the Book of Lost Tales, other beings such as dryads and mermaids were set to be lesser Ainur as well, but those beings became what we know as the Maiar in the canon version of the Legendarium. Concerning many of these characters, they have other non-canonical versions that Tolkien toyed with, before they evolved into what we know in the canon Legendarium. I won't speak much to those here, but please look into those early conceptions if you're interested. Now to look at the Maiar more specifically, there were two leaders of the chiefs of the Maiar, and they were Eonwë, the servant, banner-bearer, and herald of Manwë, the Elder King, and Elmarë, the servant and handmaiden of Varda. Eonwë had the most skill in weapons in Arda, although he was not the most powerful in might. He was the person who first greeted Eärendil when he came to Aman, and Eonwë, as the herald of the Elder King, led the host of the Valar during the War of Wrath. He took the Silmarils and guarded them, allowing the sons of Fëanor, Maithros, and Maegor to steal them rather than slaying them, even if he rathered they had not attempted to take them in the first place. He also came among the faithful men of the Edain, teaching them and giving to them wisdom, power, and longer life before they became the Númenóreans. He also spoke with Sauron, saying he should go west and await the Valar's judgment after the war, but Sauron ended up fleeing. Eonwë eventually returned to Valinor with the host and elves who would return there, for he invited the elves of Beleriand to depart from Middle-earth. I should add that I am unsure whether the Valar actually fought in the War of Wrath themselves, as I may have said in previous videos, for I see Eonwë led the host of the Valar, rather than Manwë. But there are arguments to be made for both sides, and it seems the strength of the Valar would have been needed in the downfall of Morgoth, but maybe it was only the strength of their servants that was needed. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Do you think the Valar took part in the War of Wrath, or do you think it was only their folk who did? Anyway, Elmarë, the other chief of the Valar, was originally the daughter of Manwë and Varda, but the idea of the Valar having children was foregone by Tolkien, and Ilmare simply became the handmaiden of Varda in the canon. Looking now at the others of the Maiar, there was the great Maia Mairon, meaning the admirable in Quenya, the servant of Aule the smith. Just as Elrond says, "Nothing is evil in the beginning," this was so with Mairon. He was a Maia interested in crafting, as we eventually see with his ringcraft during the Second Age, but he was most interested in the power to order things to his will, so he became Gorthaur, the servant of Melkor, and eventually he was named Sauron. Sauron would go on to harass the Free Peoples during the Second and Third Ages, eventually meeting his doom after his One Ring was destroyed. His tale is also told more in full elsewhere. Speaking of the servants of Melkor, there were the Valar Raukar, or Balrogs, seduced into the servitude of Melkor before the coming of the Elves. These were demon creatures of fire and shadow, and besides Sauron, they were the greatest servants of Melkor. One might argue that they actually did more to aid Melkor during the Elder Days than did Sauron. Gothmog and Durin's Bane were the only two named Balrogs we know of, besides one called Lungorthin, Lord of Balrogs, in the Lay of the Children of Hurin. However, Lungorthin may just be Gothmog or a different Lord of Balrogs, as the name does not appear in the published Silmarillion. The Balrogs would save Melkor from the webs of Ungoliant in the Years of the Trees, who herself may be a Maia as well, or a different dark spirit that aided Melkor, and the Balrogs would act as the great commanders of Morgoth's armies during the First Age. Many Balrogs would be slain during the later years of the First Age, but at least one, Durin's Bane, survived and went beneath Khazad-dûm. With him, as we know, he would take Khazad-dûm from the dwarves, and eventually meet his end at the hands of Gandalf the Wizard. Next we have the Maiar who served Ulmo, the Vala of the Seas and Waters, and they were named Ose, Uinen, and Salmar. Salmar made the Ulumuri for Ulmo, which were great conchs that produced the music of the sea. Now Ose was a Maia and master of the seas that washed the shores of Middle-earth, and he loved the winds of Manwë, as he enjoyed storms. However, in the earliest days of Arda, when the world was still in creation, Melkor sought to sway Ose to his side, and he promised him the power and realm of Ulmo if he served him. There was a time when there were great tumults in the sea that ruined many lands. However, at the prayer of Aule, whose province was rock and metal, Ose's wife Uinen restrained Ose and brought him before Ulmo, who pardoned him. Ose returned to his allegiance and served Ulmo, but he still loved the violence of the sea, and would commit it without the bidding of Ulmo. Those who dwelt by the sea may have loved him, as he was the master of the sea near to the coast, but they trusted him not. His wife Uinen was the lady of the seas, and her hair spread through all waters under the sky. She loved creatures and weeds of the salt streams, and mariners revered her, for she could calm the waters and wildness of her husband Ose. The Númenóreans revered and loved her as they did the Valar, for they were subjected to the sea upon their island and boats. Now we have Arian and Tilion. Arian, meaning Maiden of Sunlight in Quenya, was a Maia of fire that Melkor failed to corrupt, and during the days of the two trees, she tended to the golden flowers of Vana, watering them with dew from the golden tree Laurelin. In her early days, she served Este and Vana, but would go on to serve Varda. The two trees were destroyed, and she was chosen by the Valar to carry the last golden fruit of her favorite tree, Laurelin, upon a vessel crafted by Aule in the sky. She thus steered the ship of the sun, of whose light Morgoth was afraid and concealed with smoke. He and his servants withdrew deeper into Angband, away from the sun. Tilion, on the other hand, meaning the Horned in Quenya, served Arome the hunter. And during the days of the two trees, he was a hunter of Arome, and even though he rode with his lord, he spent much time in Lorien, the Lorien of Aman in the west, under the silver light of the tree Telperion. He loved the tree and the color silver, and he wanted to care for the last flower of Telperion after the two trees were destroyed. The Valar allotted him the privilege, and he guided the vessel of the moon, although he did not always follow the correct path, allowing for the moon to be in the sky with the sun at the same time, or for it to not be present at all. Tilion loved Arian, and sought to come close to her, but whenever he did, the moon was darkened and singed by her heat. The moon went through the sky 7 times before the sun joined it. For the moon, Morgoth sent spirits of shadow against Tilion, but Tilion had victory over them in Ilmen, a part of the atmosphere in Arda, where stars dwelt. Now, I would be remiss if I did not speak about Melian the Maya, arguably the most famous of the Maiar in the First Age. In Sindarin, her name means dear gift. She served Vana and Este, but was said to be akin to Yavanna before the world was made. She tended the trees that flowered in the gardens of Urmo in the west, before she came to Middle-earth. Wherever she tread, nightingales sang of her. After the awakening of the elves, she went to Middle-earth and filled the silence of it with her voice and the voices of her birds. Near the end of their journey in Beleriand, Elwë, later named Thingol, heard the voice of Melian, and the two fell in love and remained there. Many of Elwë's people remained in Beleriand, and would follow Thingol and Melian after the two returned to them. Their kingdom would be Doriath, and Melian would place a girdle of protection upon it, lasting until after the death of Thingol, and Melian's departure from Middle-earth, thus allowing for the ruin of Doriath. Their child was Luthien, and she had the beauty of the Eldar, the firstborn children of Ilúvatar, and the Ainur, the divine race within her. Her descendants with Beren would not only be half-elves, but they too would retain some of the race of the Ainur and the Maiar within them. It's possible that some gifts, such as the gift of healing bestowed upon Elrond and Aragorn, came from their Maya ancestor. Melian deserves a future epic character history in her own right to get into more of a detailed conversation about her. Finally, we come to the 5 Maiar who would become the Istari. These Maiar were named Alatar and Palando, who most likely served Arome. The later names of these two were Morinatar and Romostamo. Iwendil, meaning lover of birds in Quenya, who served Yavanna and had a love for animals. Curumo, who, alike to Mairon, served Aule and eventually turned to evil, and his name most likely means cunning one. And probably my favorite of the Maiar, Aloran, derived from Alori, meaning dreams in Quenya, who served Manwë, Varda, Urmo, and Nienna, being accounted as the wisest of the Maiar. He dwelt in Lorien and Valinor during his early days, and his time with Nienna taught him pity and patience. But he also loved the elves and walked among them unseen, or in the appearance of one of them, or he would send them fair visions, giving them wisdom in their hearts. During a council of the Valar, the Powers decided to send 5 emissaries to Middle-earth to help them combat the growing darkness of Sauron. Curumo and Alatar volunteered. Manwë wished for Aloran to go as the 3rd messenger, but Varda said not as the 3rd, and Curumo would remember this, as I feel this began his jealousy of Aloran. Aloran said he thought he was too weak for this task, and he feared Sauron, to which Manwë replied this was all the more reason he should go. Curumo took Iwendil because Yavanna begged him, and this he would also remember, and this probably added to his dislike of Iwendil later. Alatar took his friend Palando. They would be the 5 Istari, who were supposed to use counsel, wisdom, and knowledge to aid the free peoples, rather than might or dominance. And so they took the forms of old men with beards, and they would come to Middle-earth in the 3rd Age. Although other writings indicate that the Blue Wizards may have come much earlier, during the 2nd Age. Curumo, the mightiest and chief of the Istari, would become Saruman the White, and eventually he would turn against his allies, becoming Saruman of many colors. Aloran would be Gandalf the Grey, and then Gandalf the White returned from death, then becoming more powerful than Saruman. Iwendil would be Radagast the Brown. Alatar and Palando would be the Blue Wizards. Of the 5 wizards, Gandalf, who had felt weak and afraid of Sauron, would be the only one to faithfully accomplish his task and return to Valinor once it was done. And his renown, duty, and love in the 3rd Age for the free peoples cannot be understated. Please check out my Wizards of Middle-earth video for more on them. While there are most definitely other Maiar in Arda, we know them not. Likely they also served the Valar, or the elements of the world themselves, making Middle-earth as it was. And so, we come to the end of our tale. From the Maiar of Middle-earth, we see that even the Valar, mighty as they were, could not do their tasks alone. Just as the Maiar aided the Valar and the free peoples, We must always remember that we are never alone. There are those out there who care for us, and who we ourselves care for, and we must be as faithful to them as many of the Maiar were faithful to the Valar. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections about the Maiar of Middle-earth? Let me know in the comments below. I really like that the Maiar were included in the Legendarium, acting as intermediaries between the Free Peoples and the Valar, and giving us villains such as Sauron and Saruman, and heroes such as Melian and Gandalf. For more information on the Maiar, please check out the Silmarillion and other related texts. Also, please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon for our podcasts and Discord server. Links are in the description below. I also wanted to give a shout out and thanks to our Valar tier patrons over on Patreon. Adrian De La Tour, Chris Ortner, Peter Shepard, Cal Wetzel, Lane Grimes, Mr. Vatnadal, Samuel McBee, Jonathan Putnam, and Kyrie Kawai. Thank you guys so much. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on Valyrian years and how elves age. Everyone, as always, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.